If being ordinary is unavoidable, was your struggle pointless from the start? You wake up before the world feels awake. Not because you want to, because somewhere in your life, you learned that waking up early makes you disciplined, and discipline makes you acceptable. The alarm rings. Your body resists. Your mind feels older than your age. Still, you get up. Staying in bed feels dangerous. Like you are already losing? Like the world is moving forward without you. Millions of people wake up exactly like this. Same tired eyes. Same quiet resentment. Same belief that today must matter, or everything before it was wasted. You tell yourself this phase is temporary. That effort always leads somewhere. That suffering now will transform into meaning later. Without that belief, the routine collapses. As a child, no one dreams of being ordinary. Children don't imagine blending into crowds. They don't picture being replaceable. They imagine being seen, chosen, remembered. They believe their life will matter in a visible way. They believe pain will be rewarded. Then slowly, that belief is corrected. Curiosity becomes distraction. Questions become inconvenience. Originality becomes risk. You learn that following rules is safer than thinking deeply. That fitting in is rewarded faster than standing out. That silence protects you more than honesty. Grades replace understanding. Obedience replaces curiosity. Approval replaces truth. You adapt. Because not adapting has consequences. Somewhere along the way, being average starts to feel dangerous. Average people are ignored. Average people are replaceable. Average people don't get protected when things go wrong. Average people have no leverage. So you run? You run toward achievement. Toward money. Toward titles that sound impressive when spoken out loud. Not because you love them, but because they promise distance from invisibility. Every achievement becomes evidence. Every failure feels like exposure. Like the world might finally see you for what you fear you are. People praise you when you succeed. They listen more carefully. They respect you conditionally. And when you stop performing, their attention fades. You notice this early. But you ignore it. You tell yourself this is normal. That this is how the world works. That questioning it is weakness. As time passes, something unsettling becomes impossible to ignore. The people you once admired don't look fulfilled. They look alert, tense, always calculating. The ones who made it still compare themselves constantly. Still fear younger faces. Still worry about becoming irrelevant. They have more, but they also have more to lose. Success didn't remove the fear. It sharpened it. Status becomes fragile. Reputation becomes exhausting. Recognition becomes addictive. One mistake can undo years of effort. One quiet period can erase relevance. And the world does not wait. You scroll through screens late at night. Faces smiling with unnatural confidence. Lives edited to look effortless. Perfect mornings. Perfect bodies. Perfect happiness. But behind every image is a number. Views. Likes. Followers. Attention becomes proof of existence. Being unseen starts to feel like disappearing. So you learn to market yourself. To shape your personality into something acceptable. To turn your life into something watchable. Not because it feels real, but because attention feels necessary. You work longer hours. You sleep less. You postpone rest. You call it discipline. You call it ambition. You call it sacrifice. You say meaning is earned through pain. You convince yourself exhaustion is proof you are doing something right. But quietly, slowly, a thought begins to form. What if none of this changes the ending? Most people don't fail loudly. They fade quietly. They show up every day. They do what is expected. They grow older. They become reliable, predictable, replaceable. One day, they stop coming. Someone else takes their place, uses the same tools, repeats the same routine. The system doesn't pause. It doesn't remember. It doesn't care. It was never designed to. Power belongs to a small number of people. Visibility belongs to even fewer. The rest keep everything running. Unnoticed. Uncelebrated. Necessary, but invisible. And for the first time, a dangerous realization appears. Maybe the struggle was never about purpose. Maybe it was about survival, inside a crowded world. A world where resources feel limited. Where attention feels scarce. Where security always feels temporary. You start to notice how early fear enters the system. Not dramatic fear. Quiet fear. Fear of falling behind. Fear of being overlooked. Fear of being replaced without warning. This fear doesn't scream. It whispers. It whispers when you rest. It whispers when you say no. It whispers when you choose yourself. It asks the same question again and again. What if you stop and never catch up? So you stay in motion. Motion becomes safety. Busyness becomes protection. You learn to fill every moment, to justify your existence with effort. If you are tired, at least you are trying. If you are exhausted, at least you are relevant. You begin to fear empty time, because empty time creates space for thoughts. And thoughts are dangerous. Thoughts lead to questions. Questions lead to doubt. Doubt threatens the structure holding everything together. So you avoid stillness. You keep scrolling. You keep working. You keep planning the next step. Always the next step. Never here. Slowly, you stop asking what you want. You ask what works. What pays. What is respected. What looks impressive from the outside. Your decisions become strategic, not honest. You choose stability over truth. Approval over peace. Safety over meaning. And you tell yourself this is maturity. But deep inside, something tightens. You feel it when success doesn't feel like relief. You feel it when achievements feel strangely empty. You reach milestones that once seemed distant. And instead of satisfaction, you feel pressure. Now you have something to protect. Your image. Your position. Your reputation. You can't slow down anymore. Because slowing down risks exposure. People now expect things from you. Consistency. Performance. Progress. You are no longer allowed to question the race. You are already part of it. And you see how power really works. Not through cruelty. Through dependency. The system doesn't need to threaten you. It just needs you to need it. Your bills. Your status. Your identity. All tied to staying useful. So you become careful? You learn what not to say. What not to challenge. What not to think too deeply about. You don't call it fear. You call it being realistic. But realism slowly turns into silence. You notice how easily people disappear. Not physically. Socially. They stop being invited. Stop being consulted. Stop being remembered. No announcement. No explanation. Just absence. And you understand something frightening? Visibility is fragile. Relevance expires. It doesn't matter how hard someone worked before. Only what they offer now. You begin to measure your life in usefulness. Am I still needed? Am I still competitive? Am I still ahead of someone? Comparison becomes constant. You don't compare because you want to. You compare because not comparing feels irresponsible. Someone younger is doing more. Someone faster is winning attention. Someone smarter is taking space. And suddenly, rest feels dangerous again. You push harder. You tell yourself this pressure will ease once you reach a certain level. But it doesn't. Because there is no level where the fear disappears. Only new levels where the fear changes shape. At first, you fear being nobody. Later, you fear becoming nobody again. Loss becomes scarier than failure. You've seen what happens to people who slip. Their confidence collapses first. Then their social value. Then their sense of self. They start apologizing for existing. And you promise yourself you won't let that happen. So you sacrifice. You sacrifice time. You sacrifice relationships. You sacrifice parts of yourself that don't fit the image. You tell yourself this is temporary. But years pass. And the temporary becomes permanent. You look back. And struggle to remember when you last felt present. Not productive. Not successful. Just present. You realize your emotions have become inconvenient. Sadness slows you down. Joy distracts you. Curiosity wastes time. So you manage yourself like a machine. Optimize. Improve. Correct. Until even your inner world feels supervised. And then something breaks. Not loudly. Quietly. You stop feeling deeply. You don't collapse. You function. You smile when appropriate. You respond when expected. But inside, there is distance. You feel like an observer of your own life. And in rare moments of honesty, a terrifying thought appears. If I stopped tomorrow? If I disappeared from this system? How long would it take to be replaced? The answer comes faster than you'd like. Too fast. And that realization hits something primal. You are not irreplaceable. You are not essential. You are tolerated as long as you perform. And suddenly, the struggle looks different. It doesn't look noble. It doesn't look meaningful. It looks necessary. Necessary to avoid falling. Necessary to avoid being forgotten. Necessary to avoid becoming invisible. You realize that survival, not fulfillment, has been guiding you. And that realization changes everything. Because if the struggle is about survival, then it doesn't end. It only pauses. You begin to wonder whether the system benefits from your exhaustion. Whether your fear keeps you compliant. Whether your ambition keeps you distracted. Distracted from asking deeper questions. Questions like, who decides what ordinary means? Who benefits from me fearing it? Who gains when I never feel enough? And slowly, another thought emerges. What if the fear of being ordinary was planted on purpose? What if it keeps millions running? without ever asking where they're going? The question grows heavier. If being ordinary is unavoidable, was your struggle pointless from the start? Or did it serve someone else, perfectly? That thought doesn't arrive gently. It feels invasive. Like a crack in something you depended on. Because if the struggle was designed, then your exhaustion wasn't accidental. You start noticing patterns you ignored before. How early fear was introduced. How quickly comparison became normal. How often worth was measured. You were never told directly that being ordinary was failure. You were shown it. Through who was praised. Through who was promoted. Through who was ignored. You watched which lives were respected. And which ones were treated as background noise. And you learned? You learned that attention equals value. That visibility equals safety. That silence equals weakness. So you adjusted yourself. Not once. Constantly. You became easier to evaluate. Easier to measure. Easier to rank. Your uniqueness was filtered. Your rough edges were softened. Your contradictions were hidden. Because complexity doesn't survive systems built on speed. You begin to see how identity slowly turned into a performance. You present confidence even when you feel hollow. You speak certainty even when you are unsure. You smile through pressure because discomfort is inconvenient. You don't do this because you are fake. You do it because being fully honest feels dangerous. Honesty risks exclusion. Honesty risks losing momentum. Honesty risks becoming difficult. And difficult people are often removed quietly. So you learn restraint. You learn how to say just enough. Feel just enough. Be just enough. Never too much. Never too slow. Never too honest. And the longer you do this, the harder it becomes to tell where the performance ends and where you begin. You notice how often people introduce themselves by what they do, not who they are, but how they function. Productivity becomes identity. Busyness becomes personality. When someone asks how you are, you answer with what you're working on, as if rest needs justification, as if existing without output is suspicious. You start to feel uneasy when nothing is scheduled, when there is no goal, no metric, because without motion, you are forced to face something uncomfortable, the possibility that you might be ordinary, not special, not exceptional, not rare, just human. And that thought feels threatening, because everything you were taught said that ordinary lives don't matter. They don't get remembered. They don't get protected. They don't get power. So you resist it. You tell yourself you just haven't reached your peak yet, that once you do, the anxiety will stop. But the anxiety doesn't stop, because it was never about reaching. It was about avoiding. Avoiding invisibility. Avoiding irrelevance. Avoiding the quiet fear that, if no one is watching, you might disappear. You realize how deeply this fear shapes behavior. Why people overwork. Why they stay in unhealthy situations. Why they tolerate disrespect. Because losing status feels worse than losing peace. You see how power shifts quietly. Not through force, but through fear of loss. When people are afraid of becoming ordinary, they accept almost anything to stay visible. They accept exhaustion. They accept instability. They accept silence. And the system doesn't need to chase them. They chase it. You think back to moments when you almost stopped. Almost questioned everything? Almost chose differently. And how quickly fear pulled you back. Fear of wasting time. Fear of starting over. Fear of being left behind. You stayed. Not because you were convinced, but because you were afraid. And then comes the most unsettling realization. If being ordinary is unavoidable, then everyone you admire, everyone you compete with, everyone you envy, is also ordinary. No matter how visible they seem. Their recognition fades. Their influence shrinks. Their names stop being spoken. Time equalizes everything. Which means the struggle was never about escaping ordinariness. It was about delaying acceptance. Delaying the truth that no amount of effort can guarantee significance. And that truth is heavy. Because if significance isn't guaranteed, then meaning can't be outsourced. It can't be earned through metrics. It can't be confirmed by applause. It has to be faced internally. And that is something no system can sell you. You begin to sense why this realization is rare. Because it removes leverage. A person who isn't terrified of being ordinary is harder to control. They don't chase endlessly. They don't compete compulsively. They don't sacrifice everything for visibility. They choose deliberately. And deliberate people are unpredictable. So the fear remains reinforced. Through culture. Through comparison. Through constant stimulation. Anything to keep you running? Anything to keep you busy? Because a busy person doesn't stop to ask, who benefits from their exhaustion? You sit with the question again. If being ordinary is unavoidable, Was your struggle pointless from the start? And for the first time, you don't rush to answer it. You let it sit. You notice how uncomfortable it feels. To not immediately justify your effort. To not defend your suffering. Because if the struggle was pointless, then a lot of pain has no explanation. And that's terrifying. But another thought follows quietly. What if the struggle wasn't pointless? Just misdirected? What if the real struggle was never meant to make you exceptional, but to keep you afraid of being normal? What if accepting ordinariness isn't giving up, but stepping out? Stepping out of comparison. Stepping out of constant proof. Stepping out of fear-driven motion. And that idea scares you, because it leaves you without instructions. No rankings. No finish lines. No audience to validate you. Just choice. Just responsibility. Just yourself. You realize why this question is avoided. Because answering it changes how you live. It changes what you chase, what you tolerate, what you fear. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So the question remains. Not as a conclusion. Not as motivation. But as a quiet threat to everything you were taught to believe. If being ordinary is unavoidable, was your struggle pointless from the start? Or was the real struggle learning to live without needing to be extraordinary at all?